Today on Left to Right, we tackle this firewall and the trans tunnel. So I've just spent the last hour and 45 minutes prepping this firewall panel and around the edge of the firewall so I can start welding this back into the truck. Previously, I cut this out so I could get this motor fit in, and I made a mistake when I put the cab mount horns back on the frame. I just tack welded them in place, but I put the right on the left and the left on the right, so they're backwards, which pushed the cab forward 2 inches. So the motor was hitting the firewall. Regardless, I was going to cut it out anyway. That way I could have some freedom when I'm setting this motor, getting the angle right and everything. But now I can put it back in. So I've prepped everything so that I can go back in. I'm going to get some magnets, stick this guy up, get the gap right all the way around, about the thickness of the blade that I used to cut it, and also the welding wire. And then I'm going to fire up the MIG, tack weld in my corners and across the whole thing. And we'll just get it tacked up for now and placed. And then I really want to start tackling this transmission tunnel. I have the seat in the truck still from the last video, and I'm going to leave it there, take some measurements, go get a plate of steel that I have up in my storage shed, and I'll bring that sheet of steel out here, and then we'll start bending, measuring, making sure we can do everything, make the trans tunnel, weld it into place, cut everything out, and just really start tackling this cab. The goal here is to get the cab done over the next few weeks. It's January 6th right now, so hopefully by the end of the January we can have a lot of the cab done, and then the bed sanded and then primer, so we can get that put on the truck as well. Need to make sure everything will work with like the frame arches and all that stuff. So let's go ahead and get this guy set into place, tack weld it up, and start trying to get after that transmission tunnel. A lot of things I did previously on the floorboards, I'm not happy with some of the work, so I might be redoing that today as well. We'll see what we get into. Worst case scenario, we're replacing some floorboards or making some new ones with the bead roller and setting those in place after we get the trans tunnel built. So let me go ahead and get this guy mocked up and set into place. So with this guy put in, you can see we have a pretty close firewall as far as the engine's concerned right here on this head. This cylinder head on the Coyote motor actually sticks back like an inch further than the passenger side. That's not a big deal right now. If I really want to, I can cut this firewall piece here after I get this guy put back in and redo this section to give me a little bit more clearance behind the head. There is a sensor right here on the cylinder head. Not sure exactly what that's for. It could be for the cam setup so it can know where home is. I know these guys function on the cam gears to change the timing. But anyways, I'll deal with that at some point, even if I have to put a panel here that you can access the back of the engine. We can do that as well. Use some rev nuts or whatever. But for the time being, my goal is to just get this guy welded back in. I got that magnet holding him up there in the top corner. This guy over here. Looks like we're set pretty much where we were when we cut it out. Just a couple of minor tweaks. So I'm gonna get the MIG fired up, ready to go, and start getting this guy set back into place. I got the bottom corner tacked right here, so we got this side lined up pretty good. I can barely put the tip of the screwdriver in, but I need to move it back a little bit. That way I got the 2 pieces of metal pretty flush. So what I'm gonna do is work this side and then work my way across and then just tack periodically, keep the heat out of the way and just move around. And I'm not looking to fill the whole thing in right now. I'll do that later after I pull the motor and transmission, because I'll tack weld everything and I'll grind it. I'll make everything smooth and metal finish it. So we're just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna move you guys back a little bit and then we'll go ahead and tack all the way around and get this guy set. Start going after that next piece. We've gotten this all tacked in. It's pretty solid as it sits right now. So that's probably as far as I'm gonna take this. I'll bring you guys over here and show you what I've done with the tacks. Some of them weren't so pretty. That wire wasn't firing off like it should, but it's a MIG, it's thin metal. If you've ever done this, you're gonna find the same issues that I have. I don't like this particular profile right here. I think I'm gonna end up cutting this out and making a different profile right there for the bead roll. More like this side where it's nice and flat. There's this profile here on this Firewall that was probably for something else. But anyways, I'll bring you guys over here, show you how it looks from the inside. And we'll get the seat measured up where the clearance is between the bottom of the seat and the floor and the shifter and everything. And then we'll start mocking up for the transmission tunnel and the drive shaft tunnel. With the Firewall piece tacked back in, we can start moving on to the next piece. I went up to the storage shed and I grabbed me some sheet metal so that we had enough sitting here in the shop for the new floorboard piece and our toe board piece, and then the tunnel for the transmission. Previously, I patched this floorboard and it turned out well over here in the corner, but the rest of this I'm not gonna need. I changed up my plans for the pedal setup. I'm gonna go with some that hang here on the Firewall made by, I think it's Fat Fender Garage. So I'm not gonna need this hole anymore. I will need a hole for the drive, for the steering column, but you know, we can cut that out at a later date. It's not that big a deal. This is doubled up steel down here, and I'm pretty sure that's for some reinforcement for everything. So we'll make sure we pay attention to that when we go to put that back in. The next piece I wanna make is this floorboard panel, and then this hump right here for the transmission bell housing. I wanna make sure I have enough room for these bolts to come out so I can get up in here and take care of the hydraulic line for the throwout bearing and for these bolts. So a little bit of serviceability in mind. So let's go ahead and start making this panel here. I will measure it out, cut out a piece of cardboard, figure out what I'm gonna do, and then take it over to my planishing hammer and start making this radius here. I'm hoping I can make this piece separate from this piece and make it all work, but I mean, best laid plans, right? So let's get started on it and see what we can make. I don't have a whole lot of experience with planishing hammers and forming a bunch of sheet metal, but there's no better time to learn than now. So let's get started on it. So what I did was take and get the bead or the edge of the fold started with the bead roller, and then went over to the fab table, clamped it down, and then bent it over with a body hammer that I had. And that gets us pretty close to where we want to be. This edge is a little bit of a radius, which I was trying to capture with the bead roller, but I didn't. That's fine. I can always bend these two together and clamp them and weld it. we're gonna be okay. It looks to be pretty close to where we want it to be. Obviously I'm a little bit wider because that's how I made the piece, but that gives us a little bit of room to shift left or right. Now I need to drill holes in this flange so that we can spot weld everything back together once we get it clamped into place. And I'm also gonna have to trace a new line across here for where I want to cut this floorboard. So let's get this new line traced out, and then we will cut and fit all these pieces and then tack weld them into place. This floorboard, I'll probably tack everything into place. That way it's all done and nice and neat. So with our new toe board installed and cut away at the same distance as this side, we can start planning out where we want this transmission tunnel to go. I'm gonna have to do some fun fabrication here. I don't have a whole lot of tools to be able to bend the metal for these complex contours, but we got a couple of tools, so I think I'm gonna go ahead and make this bottom piece first, have it stop up here in the front, and then start tying everything else to it. It's probably gonna look pretty rough, but I'm kind of at a disadvantage with some tools. So we're gonna do the best we can. We're gonna make room for this bolt and make sure we can still get this guy out of here. So I have to make sure this part of the tunnel protrudes out far enough so that I can get these bolts out. If I ever need to pull the transmission out for the clutch or any issues, it'd probably be easier just to pull the whole motor, but I'd like it to be able to be serviceable. So let's get started on making this next piece. It's gonna be difficult. So what I have here is a 22-inch by 48-inch piece of 18-gauge steel, and I've drawn out the whole layout for the trans tunnel piece. I've got 9 inches flat on the top, 1 inch here at the radius, and then about 5.5 inches of the vertical. And I also went and laid some beads here on the flat spot and drew out where my shifter is going to come through. I've clamped a 1x3 square, a rectangle tube here on the back, and I'm going to take this and bend it up, and then hopefully that gives me this radius, and then we can have a nice transition down instead of having a flat. If this doesn't work, then what I'm going to have to do is clamp it down to the table and then just bend it straight down, and then it'll be more flat instead of a radius. It's not that big a deal, I just wanted to have a radius on the side. So let's give this a shot and see if we're successful. Hopefully it doesn't slip off. All right, so that gives us one heck of a radius here on the top. A lot more than what I was looking for, but I think I can probably bend it over the rest of the way and then fold it back. There we go. So that's one side done. Let's take this, flip it around, bend up the other, and see how it lays out in the truck. Hopefully it's not too wide. That would suck. All right, that gives us our second radius. So it's not perfect, but this is our tunnel. I don't have a brake, so this is the best I can do. And the radius is pretty consistent across here, except for the ends. It flares out a little bit, which really isn't a bad thing because on the front, I'm gonna have to transition into like a bell as I go around the bell housing. Looks like it's pretty consistent all the way across. I wanted my flat spot to be about 9 inches. And that's what we got. It's 9 up here, yep, and 9 there. We got our 2 bead rolled ribs here. And then I'm gonna have to go ahead and drill the holes out all the way around for the MGW shifter, and then make sure it sets down over top of that when we go to set this in place. I got a little bit of room in the back. I probably have like 4 inches extra to go out the back of the cab, but I have to go in there and cut all that out. So I'm gonna cut this hole out, and then I'll go cut the cab out, and then we'll set this in there and start figuring out how this is gonna lay out. With the floorboard cut out, the tunnel set in place, it's pretty centered for the shifter. I can start tracing along the edge of the floor, take it back out, cut all the excess off, tack weld it in place, make sure everything's fitting pretty good, and go from there. I'll just work my way around tacking, and I'll probably do that off camera because no one wants to watch that. I'll do the tops, and then from the underside at the joint, I'll just do an outside weld instead of a fillet on the front. And then when we go to put everything together, I'll seam seal all my joints. So let's go ahead and get started tracing. I'll do this side, and then I'll jump on the other side and do that. I think right now I want to make sure it's good left to right. I think we're pretty good, but I have to pull it out a little bit. Sweet. Now that's done, we can pull it out, take it over to the table, cut it, and start tacking it in. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking this piece of metal and running a bead through it so that I can replace a piece of the firewall that I'm not comfortable with. The original inline 6 engine and transmission sat off to one side, so the hump from inside the cab is off to the right side. Now I want to correct that, split the hump, and move it over before we finish the bell housing portion of this transmission tunnel. We have the drive shaft tunnel portion tacked in, and I'm happy with where that's at. I have a little bit of adjusting to do, but I'll do that off camera and then metal finish everything after we get this bell housing portion done. That's the goal for today, is to get the bell housing portion fabricated and then fitted, not necessarily tacked into place. It might go over into tomorrow, but still, I want to get started on that so we can get this floorboard finished. So I'm going to show you guys what the firewall looks like right now, where this piece goes, and then we'll cut that out and start getting to work. So over here on the firewall, you can see this depression from the original firewall, and then the hump right there for the original engine placement and transmission placement. I want to move all that over this way, and I've created this piece of metal to sit over top right here. To take its place. The only thing I have left to do right now is to get this part cut out, and then we'll tack weld that in place, and then we'll flatten this whole side. Once that's tack welded and finished metal, or metal finished, we can cut the portion of the hump out, move it over, and then go ahead and piece together the rest of that. That'll give me a more symmetrical angle here, and everything will work much better with the new transmission bell housing. So let's go ahead and get this cut out, this tacked into place, metal finish it, and just start working on the rest of this. Like I said, I'd like to get all that covered up today if we can. Off camera yesterday, I went ahead and finished getting this hump right here moved over toward the driver's side a little bit. I added about 3.5 inches of metal in between it, welded it up, and ground it smooth on the inside. This morning, I've been working on creating a masking tape and poster board template for the rest of the tunnel. I'm gonna relocate you guys over to the inside of the cab and show you guys what all that looks like. Warning, it's pretty ugly. As you guys can see, I've made this template out of poster board and some masking tape. It's gonna be difficult to make this shape because I don't have the capability to shrink and stretch the metal. I don't have the sandbag or a shrink or stretch or anything like that. But I do have, you know, a planching hammer, and I can make some of these bends to accommodate this shape. I might have to cut some of the metal and then pull it together, weld it, and then grind it to make it all look right. So that will end up in a less than ideal look, but it's under the truck and I'll be able to grind it and, you know, make it look decent. So let's get this guy pulled off of here and we will get it traced onto a piece of sheet metal and start cutting and bending it into shape. Hopefully I can make it look good. I only got so much that I can do here in the shop. Nice. So I want to catch you guys up on what we've done. Unfortunately, I was unable to make the radius like I wanted to with the planishing hammer, so we've resorted to small templates, and then we're going to bend it, weld it in place, and then work our way up. The next piece I'm going to try to make is one continuous piece right here on the top, and I will fold the edge over to meet this flat piece here, and then trace the seam and cut it out. So I'm gonna go cut a strip that's the correct length for that, and then start bending it and see if we can't make the piece fit as one, so I can have as little weld joints as I can. I'm trying to make this look decent. You won't be able to see it from, obviously, up top, because we're gonna cover this all with carpet, but I still wanna do a decent job. So let's get this second piece or template made, and then start fitting it into place. Upper piece made here, and I got this joint pretty tight. I'm gonna probably TIG weld that way I can get a little bit of movement out of it and use the hammer and dolly to make it as smooth as possible. This upper one's just about the same. I'm only gonna MIG around the edges when we put this whole panel in. So I'm gonna get this panel trimmed to fit over here. I still have this top piece to make and the whole other side. So right now I'm gonna measure and get that side cut off, and then we're gonna go ahead and start building the other side. I think I'll leave these last upper pieces until last. That way I can clamp this guy into place and keep it steady and just keep working this whole thing in and out. So I'm gonna go ahead and measure and mark that side, and that will be where I start cutting and fitting all the other pieces. I have the top long here and the bottom long, and we can just mark all that later and then cut it out. That way we have room to work. So I just spent the last 4 hours welding up all the seams that I could inside the truck until I ran out of argon. So I'm gonna have to pick up another tank of that, but for time being, this is pretty much completed. The rest of the work will just be grinding down the welds where I need to from the inside, which I'm not gonna do too much of because it's gonna get covered with sound deadening and carpet and stuff like that. But I will dress the outside up really well. That way it looks good from the outside. So for this video, that's everything. The next thing I'm gonna be doing is going after the steering column, the pedals, and the brake lines. There's a lot of metal work left to do on the truck, like these seams over here where these patch panels were put in, and then this seam around the back of the cab I'd like to get filled. So that'll all happen, probably short episodes doing that stuff, I don't know. We'll see. I wanna keep you guys following along for the build. So that concludes today's video. Thanks for watching. See you next time. There's first, there's second. Let's go ahead and put it in drive. There's reverse.